There's a terrible new disease destroying the country. It's making people fall off cliffs in numbers that have set alarms off at the CDC. It didn't come from a lab, but a movie studio. It's called,
Głupców, którzy bezczeszczą święte dzieła.
or as I like to call it,
Adaptation-itis.
You see, it used to be that if someone made a path, you wanted to stay on that path because it meant you would be led to a pot of gold. Like a huge pot of gold. But when people catch adaptation-itis, folks who have never made a good path in their entire lives start thinking that they can make their own trails, and they fall off the path, and they do not get the gold. Usually, they die. Adaptation-itis is bad. You don't want it. I tried to think of a different way to say this, but Season 2 gets everything wrong, especially characters.
Disappointed!
If you have a fondness for Dandelion, Yennefer, Ciri, Tess, hell, even Geralt, I'd advise watching this show with 3 bottles of Ambien flowing through your body. Or, if you know magic, go ahead and cast a Quen sign, because we're going to be taking a bath in it.
I know you want to scream, but it's too soon. It's too soon because I haven't even started yet.
Dandelion is one of my favorite characters from the books, and he's been turned into a... I just can't say it. Let's compare the Dandelion from the books with the abomination the show has created. Here goes. There's a great passage in Blood of Elves where we learn about Dandelion's notable past, which involves more than just achievements from inside the bedroom. Let's hear it from Sapkowski himself. He had studied there for years, then had lectured for a year in the faculty of Trouvailleurship and Poetry. The post of lecturer had been offered to him when he passed his final exams with full marks, to the astonishment of professors with whom he had earned the reputation of lazybones, rake, and idiot during his studies. He's not just a funny poet. Any fantasy series can do that. He's a brilliant bard who's a prodigious student who went on to become a professor of Trouvailleurship and Poetry, the most esteemed university in the land, Oxenfurt. They simply don't include this moment in the series. Then there's a verbal duel between Dandelion and Rince. In the book, it's a funny and witty exchange from beginning to end. When Dandelion is fleeing the mercenary wizard, he runs down a secret passage hidden by a tapestry. In the wry internal dialogue playing out in Dandelion's head, he tells us that he's taken this escape route so often that he knew it like the back of his hand, having used it numerous times to flee creditors, jealous husbands, and furious rivals from whom he had, from time to time, stolen rhymes and tunes. Once captured, the exchange between the poet and wizard arrives at a funny note on poetry, and it really should have been included line by freaking line. Explaining why he doesn't specifically mention people in his songs, he says, for example, if having sung the ballad about the Mary Miller's wife, I were to announce it's really about Shrifka, Miller Loke's wife, and I included an announcement that Shrifka can most easily be bedded every Thursday because on Thursdays the miller goes to the market, it would no longer be poetry. It would either be rhyming couplets or slander. The dialogue here is clever and lyrical. What do we get from Netflix? A series of predictable threats between Rince and Dandelion that could have been in any TV show on any network at any time. So in the books, we see that Dandelion is a brilliant poet, clever in the face of torture, has a charming internal dialogue, and oh yeah, he's a spy for Dijkstra. The writers for Netflix said, nah, we can do better, and made him a goofball who is involved with some whack underground railroad for elves called the Sandpiper, which, god fucking damn it, is a tiny fucking bird.
Oh, my God, that is awful.
Sadly, we see little of Dandelion in Season 2, but we do know the boy has been hit in the gym and doesn't need a jacket because he's got a giant animal pelt on his chest. Not sure how Geralt hasn't mistaken it for a monster and hacked that thing off yet. As Henry Cavill says, man, they fucked up Ciri. No, but really, they're getting her so wrong.
She's tougher than you think.
At the Netflix Tadom event, Cavill said to his fellow cast members, "You guys bring so much nuance and detail to these characters, which are often at risk of being oversimplified. It's an epic and refined dig at the terrible writing of this show. And they've definitely oversimplified Ciri. In the books at this point, her biggest motivator is fear, and more importantly, a desire to confront and destroy it. That fear manifests itself as the Nilfgaardians. Ciri wants to kill them all, not only for destroying her family and kingdom, but because the Black Knight with the wings on his helmet made her feel scared. She even tells us this while training with the sword at the keep. She says, "Why do you think I'm learning to fight with a sword? I want to kill him, that Black Knight from Cintra with wings on his helmet, for what he did for me, for making me afraid. And I'm going to kill him. That's why I'm learning it." This attitude is blatantly missing from the show. If the show wants us to know anything about Ciri at all, it's that she's just as good with a blade as any ruffian with a broadsword drinking ale next to you. Are they really going to flatten her into another uninspiring female warrior? Here's another thing that will blow your mind. Some of the absolute best passages from this novel are Ciri learning magic with Yennefer, and my most favorite ones are of her reading great books and practicing spells with her hands. It's without a doubt some of the best writing the genre has to offer. But the writers at Netflix decided not to include it at all.
Disappointed!
Omitting that from the show is totally insane because it's so deeply tied to her identity as a legendary magic user, not just another person with magic abilities or someone with a sword who can hack a head off. Not including this means they are also neglecting the growing and unique bond between Ciri and Yennefer because of this training in magic. Towards the closing moments of the novel, Ciri reveals that her love of Geralt is what will forever both unite and separate her and Yennefer. It creates a unique and complex closeness between the two characters that I think is part of the magic of Sapkowski's writing. It's really complex stuff. The show throws in a few scenes where she cries blood out of her eyes with Yennefer by her side, which in turn makes me cry blood out of mine. It's a clear dividing line between writing abilities. Sapkowski bravely ventures into exploring this kind of a relationship, while the writers of the show shy away from it, essentially acknowledging that they aren't up to the task of handling something this complex and nuanced. In the book, she's also developing important moral stances, like realizing witchers should perhaps not be neutral and should actually expand their role in the world. She tells us a witcher has to defend and save. Never will I be neutral. Never will I be indifferent. Never. This philosophic position seems to create an interesting point of contrast between Ciri the child who looks unquestioningly upon the world to a more independently minded young adult. The show has established none of this deep, powerful emotional arc and equally deep, powerful, and important philosophical journey which play a major role in this character's identity. So yeah, I guess Ciri's just another Galadriel now. Then we have Triss. Man, so much is missing from Triss in this series. In the books, she's a powerful, deeply scarred survivor of Sodden Hill and even has an epitaph, the 14th killed at Sodden Hill. It's kind of like a clever paradox he's created. Here's the total horror Triss experienced during the Battle of Sodden Hill. She recounts that I suddenly found myself on the ground on a pile of charred, smoking rags, and I realized that the pile of rags was Yoel, and that the thing next to her, that awful thing, that trunk with no arms and no legs, which was screaming so horrifically, was Coral. And I thought the blood in which I was lying was Coral's blood, but it was my own. Most of the corpses were in hard to recognize pieces. Of those who know me well, only Yennefer was the only one to survive, and Yennefer was blind. So the show completely removed this recollection from her character, and in doing so, it does a major disservice to her. It's extremely important to show this horror because of the profound depth it adds to a philosophical argument she makes while in a very tough debate with the witchers at Kaer Morhen. The show also stifles her eroticism, which is a bit of a shocker considering this is supposed to be more of an adult-leaning fantasy. I'll discuss that in a moment when we get to the plot. Next, I want to talk about Yennefer. To say they've completely botched Yennefer in this season is an understatement. Without a doubt, Yennefer has an incredible role to play at the conclusion of the book Blood of Elves. I'd argue it's some of the most important moments in the entire series. It's Yennefer teaching Ciri about magic. If I was the actress who played Yennefer, I would be screaming at the producers and writers to let me say these hallowed lines, which is basically a description of magic in 3 parts. Seriously, these 3 passages are among the absolute best descriptions of magic in the entire fantasy genre. I'm going to read them, but hopefully you can have the book and read it for yourself because it's something to be experienced. Magic, Yennefer, her eyes fixed on the sky above the hills, rested her hands on the pommel of the saddle, is, in some people's opinion, the embodiment of chaos. It is a key capable of opening the forbidden door, the door behind which lurk nightmares, fear, and unimaginable horrors, behind which enemies hide and wait, destructive powers, the forces of pure evil capable of annihilating not only the one who opens the door, but with them the entire world. And since there is no lack of those who try to open the door, someone, at some point, is going to make a mistake, and then the destruction of the world will be forejudged and inevitable. Magic is, therefore, the revenge and the weapon of chaos. The fact that, following the conjunction of the spheres, people have learned to use magic is the curse and undoing of the world, the undoing of mankind. And that's how it is, Ciri. Those who believe that magic is chaos are not mistaken. Then she offers another definition. Magic, Yennefer continued after a while, is, in some people's opinion, art. Great, elitist art, capable of creating beautiful and extraordinary things. Magic is a talent granted to only a chosen few. Others, deprived of talent, can only look at the results of the artist's work with admiration and envy, can admire the finished work while feeling that without these creations and without this talent, the world would be a poorer place. The fact that, following the conjunction of the spheres, some chosen few discovered talent and magic within themselves, the fact that they found art within themselves, is the blessing of beauty. And that's how it is. Those who believe that magic is art are also right. Then she offers the final definition. There are also those according to whom magic is a science. In order to master it, talent and innate ability alone are not enough. Years of keen study and arduous work are essential. Endurance and self-discipline are necessary. Magic acquired like this is knowledge, learning, the limits of which are constantly stretched by enlightened and vigorous minds, by experience, experiments, and practice. Magic acquired in such a way is progress. It is the plow, the loom, the watermill, the smelting furnace, the winch and the pulley. It is progress, evolution, change. It is constant movement, upwards, towards improvement, towards the stars. The fact that following the conjunction of the spheres, we discovered magic will, one day, allow us to reach the stars. Also, Yennefer explains how to draw what she calls force from all the elements in the world, as well as how hallowed places like intersections, which are powerful points where magic flows, and animals function in the Witcher's conception of magic. Intersections, for example, are marked by trees which have dried up, gnarled plants, places avoided by all animals except cats. She makes a quick additional note on felines, which is just an amusing quirk that adds another layer of charm and uniqueness to the magic in Sapkowski's world. Cats like sleeping and resting on intersections. There are many stories about magical animals, but really, apart from the dragon, the cat is the only creature which can absorb the force. Yennefer also explains the dangers of magic, about coping with the pain of drawing magic, overdrawing, and releasing the magical forces. But then she reminds Ciri that casting a spell is a dignified activity. She tells her, "Let me remind you that spells are a serious matter. They are cast with grace and pride." Man, that's so awesome. So basically, Yennefer is the key to understanding magic and the universe of The Witcher. What did the show do with Yen? She's shoved off on a boring quest entirely invented by the Netflix writers. Well, I guess to be fair, at the end she does stand next to Ciri as she weeps blood and they teleport across a river. So based on what I've just shared, that sounds like a great representation of how Ciri learns magic to me. How do you guys feel? Alright, it's time we move deeper into the analysis of the plot.
It's all horseshit.
You'll need another 3 bottles of Ambien along with a renewed Quinn sign to make it through this without breaking your mind. Oh yeah, and as for Geralt kills it in every scene, folks, because Henry Cavill is such an incredible actor. This series is totally dead after this guy leaves. Zero doubt. Alright, we snuggle into this season with a warm, wintry tale of betrayal and slaughter. By the conclusion of episode 1, I'm feeling great, mostly because of the half-finished Polaner Hefeweizen and Ambien I've thrown back. Then, it happens. I watch episode 2. And I can tell you, episode 2 is where the entire Witcher season dies. You see, the Witchers have a party where they must have rented out a whole town of harlots and they turned Kaer Morhen into a Playboy mansion from the 90s and Vesemir's the Witcher Hugh Hefner. It comes off as a weird excuse to show some boobs because a Netflix executive said, this should be more Game of Thronesy. They could have done that with a proper introduction to Triss's erotic life, which she elaborates for us in the books. Here, I'll read it for you. It had begun with a sour taste of forbidden fruit, made all the more exciting by the strict rules of the academy and the prohibitions of the mistress under which she practiced. Then came her independence, freedom, and crazy promiscuity, which ended, as it usually does, in bitterness, disillusionment, and resignation. That was followed by a short-lived, entertaining fascination with the same sex, which ended in the conclusion that soiling towels, passing wind, and greediness were by no means exclusively male attributes. Just imagine the porny montage they could have shown here. The plot really starts to go off the rails when Eskel turns into a giant tree with a bloodthirst for witchers and has to be killed. But oh no, they weren't done destroying this show yet. If turning Eskel into a tree and killing him was the show slicing a gash in the chest of the series, then what comes next was the show shoving a blade into its eye. You see, Adaptation-itis rears its ugly head and really takes them off course. They do what all others with Adaptation-itis have done. They create their own terrible plot in place of one that was legendary. So here we go, folks. Over the cliff and off into the dark abyss of a Netflix reimagining originally involved some characters from a popular fantasy series called The Witcher. They take Yennefer, Francesca, and Virgilla to a secret dimension with a witch who lives in a hut with no doors in a world of dreams, and I'm drinking a lot to get through that sentence. She has the power to give each of them what they want the most. Francesca wants a child and a safe place to start her civilization anew, and Virgilla wants an empire, so the demon witch makes it so. The two enter into an alliance and elves start living in Cintra. Yennefer is the only one who resists the offer from the witch, and because of that, most of the time we spend with Yen involves her resisting temptation to give Ciri to the demon to restore her magical powers, and is just very boring. Oh yeah. I should also mention that Yennefer has lost her magic as a result of casting an incredibly powerful fire spell to save everyone at the Battle of Sodden Hill. In the books, of course, she's briefly blind. Yennefer returns to the Council of Mages in a scantily clad nightgown, while the rest of the mages are wearing their best regal wizarding robes fit for a magical ball and squabbling about the new Nilfgaard and Elven alliance. She's tortured by the pervy old wizard with no hands but extreme kinkiness until he's thrown against the wall by Tissaia. The elves are pouring into Cintra, and the show has a clear message for all countries. Open your borders and forcefully draft the new population into your army. Seems unethical. Ciri trains on the Witcher course, like a lot. She trains hard. To balance all the destruction to the plot that they've done so far, they managed to get in an accurate quote from the books when Lambert screams at Ciri to breathe, damn it, you're panting like a dying mammoth, which I had to go ridiculously double check to see if that was actually in there. Why you would pick this completely unremarkable line, I have no idea. Apparently, it's better than some of the best writing about magic in the entire fantasy genre.
So close.
Then the series totally ignores a hugely important debate among the Witchers and Triss with some really fucking awesome quotes in it. You see, there's this massive and important philosophical debate about the importance of emotions and the notions of neutrality and duty, and the utter terror and bloodshed during the Battle of Sodden Hill. It gives incredible depth to both Triss and Geralt and the Witchers in general. Triss sits down at their dinner table basically and starts noting their indifference to the world. She thinks to herself, they did not want to know anything. They cared nothing for the dilemmas which drove sleep from kings, wizards, rulers, and leaders, or for the problems which made councils, circles, and gatherings tremble and buzz. Later in the conversation, the Witchers admit that war is good for business. It's well known that monsters abound wherever armies have passed. The most money is always made in places like that. True, Cohen acknowledged. The neighborhood grows deserted. Only women who can't fend for themselves remain in villages. Scores of children with no home or care are roaming around. They are easy prey, which attracts monsters. Triss challenges them here, and rightfully so. It's not that they are indifferent to the world, they're just looking out for themselves. She scolds them, saying, "It suits you. A serious, bloody war will lead to more deserted villages, more widowed women, and simply hordes of orphaned children." Then she calls upon them to help with the impending war. The world is falling to ruins. We can watch it happen and do nothing, or we can counteract it. Geralt says he's not sure what Triss expects of him. Then he expounds a dark but realistic view of the world. "I kill monsters for money. I defend children when their parents pay me to. If Nilfgaardian parents pay me, I'll defend Nilfgaardian children. And even if the world lies in ruin, which seems unlikely to me, I'll carry on killing monsters in the ruins of this world until some monster kills me. That's my fate, my reason, my life and attitude towards the world." He continues saying, "I know I'm going to die in some cave that stinks of carcasses, torn apart by a griffin, lamia, or manticore, but I don't want to die in a war because they are not my wars." Triss rebukes him with an incredibly powerful line about duty. "I was a magician. I, too, could have said it wasn't my war, that I could mix elixirs for the Nilfgaardians on the ruins of the world." What a great visual. She goes on to say she could have teleported away back to her safe island tower. "But we defended it because it's what had to be done. And if the need arises, I'll stand on the hill again." It's a chilling chastisement of Geralt and the Witcher profession and their self-serving notions. It creates real tensions between them because these are how each fundamentally views the world. And the Netflix series regrettably doesn't show any of this.
You got me there.
Moving on, Geralt and Ciri go out into the forest to kill the monster that wounded Eskel, only to find an even more hideous monster. No, it's not Lauren Hisrich or that annoying interviewer who believes fans are toxic. It traps Ciri after a brief chase, but then Geralt jumps off a cliff, grinds its back open, then slices its head off. Yennefer is tapped to kill a political prisoner from Nilfgaard, who's not just any prisoner, but the knight with the dark armor and wings on his helmet. Instead, she decides to spare his life and flee with him into the night, which further drags this story off into a very, very boring direction.
Disappointed!
A flower that springs only from pure elven blood has been popping up all over Kaer Morhen, and Vesemir realizes that it's coming from Ciri. You can tell from this sentence it's not in the books, but only in the dim minds of the writing team. In the books, Vesemir is just a fencing master who was never allowed into the laboratorium, and who wouldn't have had this kind of herbical or alchemical knowledge. It is Triss, her erudition, her cunning, and her risky exploration of Ciri's mind that discovers Ciri is the White Flame and that she possesses powerful magical abilities in elven blood. After all, it's Triss who encourages Ciri to drink the white seagull that eases her into a trance, even though there is a risk of stroke. This is a huge discovery and a big credit to Triss's risky endeavor. In the show, She just casts a spell with no consequence in BD.
It's dangerous.
No, it just requires that we trust each other.
It's also during this vision that we first hear the epic line of Vilgefortz. You've mistaken the stars reflected on the surface of the lake at night for the heavens. You would have thought they would have wanted this iconic line in the show, but nah.
Disappointed!
Another big departure is the idea that the Witchers are trying to create more Witchers. They're not. This is another path of folly that the Netflix writers invented and chose to pursue that needlessly chews up time, which could have been used for the important, and let's be honest here, far better storylines from the book. In the books, they used to take a mage and the Trial of Grasses to turn a child into a Witcher, but the last mage with this kind of knowledge died a long time ago. It's not even an interesting storyline, but that seemed to be the criteria these writers were working with. Boring in, exciting, emotional, philosophical, lyrical, out. Remember Dandelion from the first series? I think the writers wanted to totally forget him. He must have said something nice about the fans or books. In the book, he spends some time in the charming and baldy university city Oxenfurt, which would have been a really fun place to hang out for an episode, but in the series, he's just singing in some random dirty fantasy village that you come across in the Lazy Afternoon Dungeons & Dragons campaign. Netflix does amazing sets for this show, so not featuring this storied spot from the books is like the Wheel of Time not featuring Tar Valon, or the Lord of the Rings not featuring the Shire. Or worse, featuring it and then not making it as cool as it is in the books. It's also a big letdown that they didn't include the debates about poetry and truth and other topics at Bleohebris. I'll never get that right, but I love it anyways. In the Seat of Friendship for the same reasons. So anyways, Dandelion is helping smuggle some people around, then gets jailed and sings to mice for most of the season. It's one of the most boring plots for one of the most exciting characters in fantasy fiction. And no, I'm not going to say his freedom fighter name.
Go fuck yourself, you whoreson.
A historian discovers that the monoliths serve as portals that monsters use to come through the continent. Ciri is taken away to a temple to study, which I think is also the inside of CB2's Malibu location. The Witcher kills the Michelet brothers here in the temple instead of confronting them with Reince on the docks in Oxenfurt. Before the arrival of the White Flame, Virgilla goes Hannibal Lecter on the generals who are eating a nice dinner in the mess hall and paralyzes them and then gruesomely kills them. I have to say, it's insanely disturbing, but not as disturbing as what comes next. They kill Roach.
You fucked that up.
Not content with the total desecration of the lore, Ciri is then possessed by the evil demon witch when she simply flies up her nostrils as a bunch of floating sparks.
Amazing.
At what point is this just akin to burning the books? The show rushes forward to destroy Witcher lore more eagerly than ever before. Possessed Ciri goes into the Witcher's Keep and is killing them in their beds, but she thinks she's at a ball. I wonder if all serial killers feel this way. Demon Ciri screams and splits the Witcher tree, which has been hiding a monolith this whole time. Screaming again, she breaks the monolith and summons two raptor snakes, which begin to munch the Witchers. The Witchers assemble and look like a bunch of evil zombies, which is fucking awesome, but also like a Kiss cover band, which is not fucking awesome. After desperately reading TVTropes.com to find a way to end their own awful plot that they have gotten stuck in, the Netflix writers give up and make Geralt say, "I know the real you is in there somewhere, Ciri," and "Keep fighting, Ciri, hold on." This is adaptation at its finest, folks. These people really thought they could just go off on their own and write an incredible story like our dear friends, only to fall to their doom and perish in this kind of plot quicksand. Anyways, Dandelion, freed from singing to rats, cowers in fear while Yennefer saves the day by projectile blasting blood out of her wrists and becoming a vassal for the demon witch, which he needs in order to inhabit this plane. How did Geralt and Yennefer figure all this out? Don't think too hard, it doesn't pay off for this show, and I'm pretty sure they didn't expect most people to watch this far after the catastrophe that was episode 2. Once the sparks fly out of Ciri and into Yennefer, Ciri snaps out of it, they jump into a portal, and then Geralt tells us what we can clearly see with our own eyes, and the old witch joins the wild hunt. 6 bottles of Percocet. I think we all needed another 6 bottles of Percocet and Ambien. I mean, like, why not? All of them. We needed all of them to deal with this. Just before the wild hump, the wild hump. I mean, why not? That would be better than what they're doing with this show. But yeah, just before the wild hunt nabs them, they jump back to the continent safe and sound. Oh yeah, and Geralt killed a white snake, which was pretty cool. The episode almost redeems itself when the Elf Queen goes around and puts a curse on the doors of all the homes with newborn babies, then kills them. That was some fucking metal shit right there. Over in Sintra, the White Flame arrives, and surprise, it's Ciri's father. This is a huge reveal at the end of the books.
Amazing.
But this series did it because they know they're getting canceled. The General and Frigilla explain that they killed the Elf Queen's baby in order to make the elves fight or show the General that they were in control, but the White Flame tells him it's actually his idea, then throws them in jail. There's a lot of frantic tying up of plot that reeks of, oh crap, these were huge parts in the book that play a major part in the series going forward, but we didn't give them enough time so we could write a completely derivative and pointless plot arc about the stupid demon witch, which occupied 90% of the season, so we better shove it in here literally in the last minutes of the last episode of the season, so those toxic fans who actually care about great works of art don't flamethrow our asses on YouTube.
Amazing.